It is really busy actually. We have the distinct impression that we're slightly in the way. What happens is that the people go down they take a trolley with them and a tray which is full of punnets, and they pick directly into those punnets.
In the peak of the season, which is now, James will employ about 2,000 people. Most of them are STAN countries, so for example they're coming now from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan. When I first arrived, the farm was majority of the workers were Polish. When I first joined the company, I earned in one day £65, which was basically both of my parents' wages in a day. So for us back then, and for me personally, that was a massive opportunity. For a lot of these workers is similar. Yes, they come here because they can actually earn with money, they can do the season and they go back pretty much.
When that balance changes, as it has in Poland, it's not really worth those people coming in. No. Which is why then we've had people from Bulgaria, from Romania, and now Kazakhstan, places like that. So how sustainable is that whole system?
Very challenging. You've got people which are coming from completely different cultures, and sometimes in the beginning you can have a shock in the business where you have a lot of new people, a lot of different languages, different cultures, and if the business is not easily adaptable, it can be a massive challenge.
As you look to the future, if we're going further and further and further away to find people who want to come and pick fruit, is that actually going to work long term?
I think we have to try to attract people from closer places.
We're here in Kent, there are a lot of people in Kent.
Yes.
Unemployment's relatively low, but it's difficult to make a seasonal job attractive to somebody who has rent to pay all year round.
I think that is the challenge. And waking at 5:30 in the morning, and sometimes you have to do long hours and work in a halt on a rainy day. I don't have an explanation how to do it, but definitely we need to think about it, yes.
You can hear more on that on Your Farm, which is on Sunday morning here on BBC Radio 4 at 6:35. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Beatrice Fenton, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.
We'll join the Today programme in a minute, but first let's take a look ahead to this weekend's Archive on 4.
It's said that science will dehumanize people and turn them into numbers.
Jacob Bronowski,
That's false, tragically false.
the polymath known for his landmark TV series, The Ascent of Man.
A household name, a man who could explain everything.
Well, almost. Exploring his life and work through the uncertain prism of the archive.
Why did her father not go and have a swimming career in Britain?
There is this lingering suspicion that he could be in security in this. The Ascent of Jacob Bronowski, tomorrow night at 8 on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds. On FM, on BBC Sounds and on your smart speaker, this is BBC Radio 4. Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Friday the 16th of August. This is Today with Michelle Hussain and Simon Jack.
The headlines this morning. People affected by the contaminated blood scandal are learning details of the compensation scheme agreed by the government. Some have suffered for their whole lives.
I will forever feel survivor's guilt at losing so many close friends at school. It was just awful. We had blood taken sort of 3 times a week at school. That's what they were doing. They were checking to see if we were being infected.
We'll speak live to the Poorhouse Kitchen. Israel's Prime Minister has condemned Jewish settlers who killed at least one Palestinian in an attack on a village in the occupied West Bank.
Also in today's programme, we meet Tony Morris, a 70-year-old teacher turned superstar DJ who's bagged a record deal and set the clubs of Glasgow Underground alight. How will he describe the courage he had?
Ugly, poor mover, and one singer really. I had an idea in my head. And I must have had a stroke or something in my mid-60s because I suddenly decided that I would reverse all of these trends.
We are in Moscow, hearing how Ukraine's incursion into Russian territory is impacting the national mood and Putin's grip on power, and how nature programmes are learning from reality TV to keep audiences hooked. First, a BBC News read by Alison. Details of the multi-billion-pound compensation scheme for victims of the infected blood scandal have been set out by the government. More than 30,000 people across the UK contracted HIV and hepatitis C after being given contaminated blood products in the 1970s and 80s in what's been described as the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS. Here's our health editor, Hugh Pym.
Compensation payments to those infected will start by the end of this year, and to those affected, including families, sometime next year. Existing support schemes will continue, as well as compensation that's awarded, and that's been welcomed by campaign groups. Ministers said the plans were an important milestone for victims and campaigners, and everything possible would be done to deliver compensation quickly. There will be extra payments to haemophiliacs who were subjected to scientific trials without consent, with £15,000 for former pupils of the specialist school Trelaws in Hampshire. A representative of that group said the sum was outrageous and insulting, given what was done to them as children.
The Palestinian health authorities say a 23-year-old man has been shot dead by Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has condemned the incident and said those responsible would be arrested. The attack happened ahead of a second day of talks in Qatar aimed at securing a ceasefire in Gaza. Our Middle East correspondent Ilan Nell reports from Jerusalem.
Footage shared on social media showed cars and houses ablaze following this deadly rampage by what locals say were dozens of extremist settlers in the West Bank village of Jit. Washington issued a condemnation saying that such attacks on Palestinian civilians were unacceptable and must stop. Earlier, a White House spokesman had said that Gaza's ceasefire talks had got off to a promising start, with a lot more work needed by negotiators from the US, Qatar and Egypt, who've been meeting an Israeli delegation. It's hoped a deal could avert the growing threat of a wider regional war. The Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, is making a rare joint trip to the Middle East with his French counterpart, Stéphane Séjourné. He said it will show that the UK and France are united in their commitment to secure a lasting peace for Israelis, Palestinians and the wider region.
Ukraine's special forces say they've killed 10 Russian soldiers in an ambush in the Kursk region. Ukraine began its incursion into eastern Russia 11 days ago. Kyiv claims it now controls 424 square miles of Russian territory. Russia's defense minister says additional forces have been moved to prevent attacks on neighboring regions, including Belgorod. Online safety campaigners are accusing WhatsApp of failing to stop the spread of child sexual abuse images. The charity the Internet Watch Foundation says the messaging service has effectively switched off safeguards. WhatsApp insists it has robust measures in place to prevent and detect abuse. Simon Jones reports.
Last month, the disgraced former BBC News presenter Hugh Edwards admitted possessing 41 indecent images of children which had been sent to him on WhatsApp. The Internet Watch Foundation says there is nothing to stop the exact same pictures being shared again on that platform, even though the police and WhatsApp know of their existence. Messages are encrypted, so no one outside the conversation is able to see its content. A spokesperson for WhatsApp insisted it had developed robust safety measures which let its users report images of abuse to the app directly, so anyone sharing them could be banned and reported to the authorities.
The Department of Health and Social Care says it has stockpiles of Mpox vaccines and treatments as part of its preparedness plan after the first case of a new deadly strain of the virus was confirmed outside of Africa. Officials in Sweden say the patient involved was infected in an African country. Mpox can be passed from human to human by close physical contact, and the World Health Organization says more cases in Europe are likely. The UK's first military satellite dedicated to observing Earth is due to launch into orbit from California this evening. The spacecraft, called Tyche, is designed to provide high-resolution images of the ground from an altitude of more than 300 miles. Our science correspondent Jonathan Amos reports.
British forces have long benefited from the use of their own state-of-the-art satellite communication system. Getting access to reconnaissance imagery from space has always required a friendly request to allies, particularly the United States. Tyche is the first step towards gaining a sovereign military Earth observation capability. The craft going up today is a demonstrator, which on current plans is expected to be followed by a network of satellites using a variety of sensor types. It could, for example, see a battlefield even through a cloud, or eavesdrop on radio transmissions.
That report was from Jonathan Ames.
Thanks, Alan. It's 6 minutes past 6. Let's get off first with the weather this morning with Helen Willits over the BBC Weather Centre. Morning, Helen.
Good morning, Simon. Hello there. So drier weather for the weekend in prospect because the ridge of high pressure is building. It won't be totally dry, there'll be a little shower around, but it doesn't look too bad at all. If you like dry and bright weather, which is what we have for you today after yesterday's deluge for much of England and Wales, although there's still the redness of the rain to clear away from Kent and Essex and Channel Islands. It's rather grey, misty and damp here at the moment, but that should clear even from the Channel Islands by the mid-morning. Then we'll have quite extensive sunshine, cloud, fair weather cloud will just tend to bubble up as we go through the day. If you catch a shower, they'll be very isolated and temperatures will do quite well. Around about average for the time of year and perhaps a little more, 19 to 22 or 23, but as high as 25 or 26 potentially in East Anglia. For Northern Ireland, here too a much drier day, bright weather, sunshine, very isolated showers coming along through the day as the wind starts to pick up a little bit, but 18 or 19 is our average as well here. Finally to Scotland, we have got a little bit of rain to clear across to Orkney at the moment. It'll move into Sheffield for a time, and there's another wet front coming into the west to bring a scattering of showers, but that will move its way quite quickly across the north of Scotland. So for many central and southern areas, it's dry, it's fine, plenty of sunshine around after the chilly start. Temperature around about 15 in the Highlands and the islands, but about 17 or 18 where we see most of the sunshine, and as I say, dryish for most this weekend.
Ellen, thank you very much. It's past 6. Let us turn to the papers, where the Daily Telegraph is saying the GPs are now demanding a pay increase of almost 11% after the government agreed an above-inflation offer for train drivers. The paper says a leaked letter from the Doctors' Union calls the uplift a reasonable objective. A BME spokesperson is quoted as saying there's still a long way to go in negotiations. The Telegraph's editorial warns against giving in to unions, saying such details put public sector workers ahead of taxpayers and have disturbing shades of the 1970s. For the Daily Mirror's political columnist Paul Routledge praises ministers for ending industrial disputes, saying sorted government is what the public wants.
The Daily Mail highlights figures published yesterday, which suggest the UK economy grew by 0.6% in the 3 months to June. It says Labour's doom-laden claims about the Tories' economic legacy have been left in tatters. The Daily Express has a similar take. Its front-page headline declares there's surely no need for tax hikes for our growing economy. The Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Laura Trott, has written a comment piece for the paper, arguing the Chancellor Rachel Reeves has no excuse to announce any increases in taxation when she sets out her budget this week.
The Eye has more details about how Britain is preparing for a potential outbreak of the new, more infectious strain of Mpox. The Deputy Director of the UK Health Security Agency tells the paper the measures include rapid testing and protocols to stop the illness spreading. She says the risk to the population is currently considered low.
The Guardian focuses on the regional divide in A-level results in England. The paper says there was a 6.5% gap in top grades between London and the South East and the North. The article quotes an academic as saying the disparity shows there's a two-tier system. The Department for Education says it aims to tackle the problem by hiring more teachers and reforming the curriculum.
And pictures of a sequin-clad Taylor Swift appear on several front pages after she performed in London last night. The Daily Express says the US star enjoyed an emotional return to Britain following the alleged terror plot that saw her cancel 3 shows in Austria. Defiant Taylor wows Wembley is the Daily Mirror's assessment. And the inside pages of The Sun have pictures of beaming fans and stern-faced armed police alongside the headline, shaking off the danger.
It is 10 past 6.
Ukraine says it has captured more territory inside Russia as its operation in the Kursk region continues. James Waterhouse, our Ukraine correspondent, is in one of the regions along the border between Ukraine and Russia, the Sumy region. James, how are the Ukrainians describing the amount of territory they now hold?
They're describing a slowing advance, Michelle, as little as now 1 or 2 kilometres per day. They are nevertheless at least 35 kilometres deep into primarily the Kursk region, it is thought. They have seemingly destroyed a major bridge on a river that flows towards Belarus, and it is continuing to expand. Now, senior Western officials have told CNN that Russia's been deploying primarily untrained conscripts from other parts of Russia to try and stem the attack, as well as several thousand troops, crucially from inside Ukraine. But then, we need to get a sense of scale here, there are hundreds of thousands, and there's more than 100,000 troops inside Ukraine. And to illustrate this point, there's a town called Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region where Russian troops are now within 10 kilometers. We've been there twice over the past 9 months, and they've been inching closer, and more central buildings have been destroyed. So it may be too late for another major Ukrainian town that's a transport hub. But for now, Russia's trying to slow with drone strikes with these devastating glide bombs launched from high. We were trying to push towards the border yesterday, and one landed about a mile away, and you can certainly feel it through the windows of our vehicles. So we're seeing familiar Russian tactics as it gradually turns its military head towards what is going on in the Kursk region. But from the activity we continue to see, Ukraine is continuing to commit to it.
Is Ukraine planning to try and hold that territory in the Kursk region of Russia?
I certainly think it is. I think in the near term, Michelle, I think they are going to look to try and draw as many Russian troops as possible. But if this is going to shake up the politics of this war and amount to some kind of bargaining chip in the long term, then they're going to have to. And it may well be keeping hold of this territory once Russia has deployed more resources to try to take it back. That may well be more difficult than the relative ease at which they have crossed the border with some of their best trained personnel. And as they march from village to village, they've even set up a major military office in the territory it's captured. So seemingly the goal is to keep this for some degree of time, but this will not be easy, not least because the idea of Russian territory being controlled by its smaller neighbour south of Moscow, I mean, that's a non-starter, you would think, for Vladimir Putin. Whether he is able to force out these Ukrainian troops, and whether Ukraine decides to keep its elite fighters in there or rotate them with more regular personnel, we'll have to wait and see. But for now, Ukraine, this is a Hail Mary move. It is going all in on the poker table to try and change the dynamics in just about every way in this invasion which has been static for so long.
James Waterhouse, thank you.
As you were hearing in the headlines, Sweden yesterday confirmed its first case of Mpox, formerly known as monkeypox, a viral infection that spreads through close contact. This will make it the first time this has been found outside Africa, this particular variant of it. Earlier on Thursday, the World Health Organization declared Mpox a global public health emergency for the second time in 2 years. Simon Jones is our correspondent. And Simon, on the Swedish case, we think this person who's been infected had been in Africa, where it's been where there was an outbreak in DRC.
That's right. Now, when the World Health Organization declared this to be a major health emergency, they would have been well aware that it was only a matter of time before cases were found outside of Africa. So we had that first case confirmed in Sweden yesterday, and we're told the person affected had visited Africa, one of the areas affected of Africa recently. Now, that person has now been isolated. They're doing contact tracing to try to ensure it doesn't spread within Sweden. But we've also just had news this morning of 3 cases reported in Pakistan from people who are said to have travelled there from the United Arab Emirates. And I think that gives you a sense of why this international emergency has been declared. Because the reality is, with international travel, it doesn't take much for something like this to spread. So now in Pakistan as well, they'll be looking at containing these cases.
And this is a different variant than what we had a couple of years ago. This is thought to be more infectious.
Yeah, you may remember back in 2022, we had a similar global health emergency over monkeypox, as it was then called. Now, the variant we have at the moment is called something called Clade 1b. Now, the one we saw back in 2022 was Clade 2, which turned out to be relatively mild, but it's thought this latest variant is more infectious and is leading to deaths. We've had 350 deaths so far in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In terms of preparations here in the UK, we've had a statement from the UK Health Security Agency. They say that the risk to the UK population is currently considered to be low, but planning is underway to prepare for any cases we might see in the UK. Part of that is ensuring clinicians are aware and able to recognise cases promptly, and we're also told there are a decent level of vaccines ready to do this.
Simon, thank you. Simon Jones, and we'll be talking to Professor Jimmy Whitworth of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine just after
6:15 now. Home building is not only a big political promise here, but also one across the Atlantic for Kamala Harris will be.
Some of this before high house prices, people struggling to get on the housing ladder. It's going to be part of the first set of pledges we think today from, as you say, the Vice President Kamala Harris, her first big speech on what her economic policies might look like should she win November's presidential election. Of course, a big count from the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, where she's going to stand as nominee for that election. George Conboy is the chairman of Brighton Securities in New York. George, morning from us, evening to you. Thanks for staying up late for us.
You bet. Good morning.
How much of this then is going to be continuity from President Biden? How much of this is going to be a check and tag?
That's interesting. A little bit of it does look like it will be a bit of a departure from the Biden administration, or if not a departure, at least something new. The housing affordability angle is a sensible angle for Harris to pursue. With mortgage rates up considerably over the last couple of years, younger people, first-time home buyers, having a harder time getting into homes of their own. So addressing that through what appears to be tax incentives for home builders, that looked like an intelligent way to attack that problem. Provide tax incentives is a sensible federal policy, and that looked like so far an important part of their proposed economic policy.
I suppose quite a bit of it as well, things like looking at tips that restaurant workers get and stuff. Lots of it looks quite interventionist, and that from the Republican perspective is a way they've been trying to paint on economics as well.
Yeah, interesting on the tipped wages part. Both sides proposed this. Of course, the first proposal came from the Trump campaign, where they proposed not to tax tipped workers' income. Now the Harris campaign appears to have adopted that stance as well. The interesting thing is, it looked like an intriguing policy, but it also may be giving away very little. Remember, it's hard, and the feds have tried for years. How we tax tips when it's a bucket full of dollar bills on the counter or some cash left next to a restaurant plate. It's hard to tax them anyway. It may be easy to say, don't worry, we won't tax you. It does potentially affect a bigger part of the economy. We have 3 to 4% of our GDP comes from the hospitality industry, and about 10% of the workforce, though not all of those are tip workers. But it's a big sector. A lot of young people work there. That's a battleground for voters, so both sides are going at it.
Yeah, speaking of battlegrounds, are you surprised how little economics has been talked about so far? It feels like it's been very much dominated by personalities, despite the sort of economic backdrop in the US.
Right. We have huge economic problems, big economic dislocation. Inflation has gutted spending power for a lot of Americans, and there hasn't been a lot of talk about it yet. So it's a very welcome phase to have both campaigns starting to talk more about actual kitchen table issues as opposed to the personalities or the history or what have you. Very welcome.
George, great to have you on the program. Thanks so much for your time. George Conboy, the chairman of Brighton Securities, joining us from New York City. Emma Wall, head of investment analysis and research at Hargreaves Lansdown, is with us as our markets guest this morning. Emma, morning.
Good morning.
First time we've had you on since that big takeover deal at Hargreaves Lansdown.
Yes, we made an announcement to the market last Friday. Unfortunately, as I'm sure you'll imagine, I'm pretty strictly bound by takeover code, so I can't comment any further, but we will be making announcements to the market in due course.
Let's return to the United States then again, because that's been, dominated the financial markets again this week, and actually strong retail sales, particularly from the likes of the big Main Street retailers like Walmart, seem to give the stock market a boost at the end of the week.
Yeah, so two quite interesting bits of data coming out of the US this week. Inflation coming down below 3% for the first time. So 2.9% for July, and then consumers, which make up a huge part of what makes up GDP strength in the US, economic strength in the US, getting a boost in terms of retail sales, and a big part of that, as you say, Walmart, which is the largest retailer in the world, had quite significant better than expected sales for the second quarter, so another quite strong indicator of actually the health of the US consumer, and then potentially what that means for the health of the US economy. So Walmart shares jumped 7% already. The Fed will have their eyes on what next happens that can really mean they can make that decision to make cuts. I don't think they're imminent. I still think they're waiting for more data, and actually, the Fed chair has been very vocal about that they are cautious, but certainly the trajectory is in the right way.
And speaking of data, been a big week of it. We've had loads of it here in the UK. Much market reaction to anything?
Yeah, so we had strong GDP data for the second quarter of the year. It was broadly as expected, so not a huge amount of market reaction, but again, it does help to show the kind of the strength in the UK. I don't think it's enough to say that we're definitely going to get a rate cut in September, because of course we did have that inflation figure that ticked up for the first time. Although what drove that was quite well understood. There was basically the impact of gas and electricity prices not falling as fast as they have been falling in previous months.
Well, as Michelle said in the papers, we have got our favourite inflation wildcard back in London, haven't we, though, as well? And I know you're going this week.
We have, and hopefully we're going to talk about Taylor Swift, but yes, she's back, and she does have an impact on inflation. She does have an impact on economic growth, so watch this space.
Yeah, just about every big business organisation that emailed yesterday after the GDP number referenced her and the euros in terms of that boost in terms of consumer spending. Emma, great to have you back in the programme. Thanks for being with us. Emma Ward, the head of investment analysis at Hargreaves Lansdown. Now, the CEO and founder of Unipart, one of Europe's leading logistics, manufacturing and consultancy companies, is stepping down from his role after 50 years. Dr. John Neal transformed Unipart into a global enterprise with operations in 21 countries and over 12,000 employees. In 2023, it reported a £1 billion turnover. Dr. Neal, good morning. Thanks for being with us on the programme.
Good morning, Will. Thanks for inviting me on.
How do you get to a decision like that then after 5 decades?
Well, you can imagine it's a really, really difficult decision to make, but in fact, it was really interesting. One of my senior colleagues sent me an email saying, your request for retirement has been carefully considered and rejected. You can reapply again in 3 years and there is no appeal.
Well, tell us then, Unipart, the idea to Unipart now as you get set to leave it with the changes?
Look, I think one of the most interesting things was changing the business model and to really oversimplify it. In the old days, we operated what I described as Model A, which were short-term power-based relationships between our stakeholders. In other words, maximizing the transactional value out of today's customers, price-based negotiations only with your suppliers, annual battle with the unions and your employees, community government's responsibility and only there for shareholders, to what we invented really, which was Model B, and we said that was all about building long-term shared destiny relationships, i.e. trying to keep your customers for life by giving them continuous added value, developing and training your employees so that you can employ them for life. Working in your communities, responsible member of the community. We've been able to keep our customers in many cases for life, future customers.
I imagine that customers have changed a lot though, as well, right? As the landscape has changed, and before you were with Unipart, there was in British Leyland as well, and people in Unipart, in a part of the world that's still at the heart of the British motor industry. What changes have you seen there, and what kind of help do you think the British motor industry is?
We've got some incredibly successful and vibrant companies in the motor industry in the UK, like Jaguar Land Rover and Aston Martin and McLaren, with real world-leading products. But for me, the real tragedy of the British motor industry is that in the 60s, if you like, we produced about 2 million cars. And at the same time, the Japanese produced about 2 million cars. But we had everything going for us. We had the most innovative products like the E-Type Jaguar, the Mini, the Range Rover, which was 20 years ahead of the SUV revolution. And markets around the world, whereas the Japanese were an island country far away from their markets, and yet they got to produce a maximum of 13 million cars, and we never got beyond 2. Now, we could be making 10 million here. That's what I think.
Well, what would turn that round? What went wrong and what would turn that round?
What went wrong? Well, the companies and countries should do the same thing. You need to take the long-term view. You need to have a clear strategic intent. In the time when I was there, the unions were very militant. The quality was poor.
The management were weak, the government stop-go policies meant you never knew what was going to happen next. If that had all been different, we could have been celebrating a 10 million volume car business in the UK today.
People have referred to you as a productivity evangelist in the past. I think around your 40-year anniversary. Is that an issue too?
Yes, it is. You need an operational excellence system that engages the employees and, really inspires them every day to seek improvements in productivity. And in many of our businesses, we will get a productivity improvement every hour, on average across the business by people using the system which, ultimately I branded as the Unipart way.
So what's next then? The golf handicap?
No, I do want to spend time with my lovely grandchildren. I really want to build a relationship with them while they're growing up. I really wasn't able to do that as much with my own children because Unipart just absorbed every hour of the day.
But if you were asked to help steer some of those changes, would you?
Yes, I'm not going to stop working. I just need a bit more control over my timetable. But yes, of course. I mean, it's been really gratifying how many people have already been in touch to say that would you be interested in giving us a bit of help.
Well, to enjoy it, Dr. John Neal with Unipart there. Thanks so much for your time. 50-year career, 50 years in the same company.
I'd just like to say goodbye to John Neal as well, because when I was sitting in your chair, essentially he's been a very important analyst and advocate for the industry over many years. So nice to hear him today. And as you say, it is time for another veteran, Gary Richardson.
50 years, who'd last that long? Morning to you. The new Premier League season starts today, and correspondent John Murray looks ahead.
Having become the first team in this league's 136-year history to win it 4 seasons running, Manchester City remain clearly the team to beat. Their latest title defence begins in London on Sunday at Chelsea, who are one of 5 clubs to have changed their manager since the end of last season, with Enzo Maresca now in charge at Stamford Bridge. Arne Slot has the task of filling the shoes of Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool. West Ham have appointed Julian Lopetegui. At Brighton, the 31-year-old Fabian Huertzela is now one of the youngest managers there's ever been at the top of the game in England. And Maresca is succeeded by Steve Cooper at Leicester City, who, like newly promoted Southampton, return after 1 season away, while Ipswich Town are back in the top flight after a 22-year absence. And it kicks off at 8 o'clock tonight at Old Trafford, when Manchester United play Fulham.
European news, and Kilmarnock reached the Conference League playoffs after a 1-0 win at Tromsø. St Mirren failed to make progress, losing 3-1 to Brann. Cricket's 100 competition concludes this weekend, and Birmingham